Okay. Stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Edelweiss?
Present.
Ms. Nelson?
Here.
Mr. Knox?
Here.
Dr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Mosher?
Here.
And Mr. Christensen?
Here.
Any correspondence or agenda changes? Persons to be heard, Sarah?
There aren't any persons to be heard on that agenda item this evening.
Okay. And now new business, may I have a motion, please, for ordinance 2025?
I move to approve emergency ordinance 2020-25 of the City and Borough of Sitka, amending emergency ordinance 2020-14 by adding an exception to the 14-day self-quarantine requirement when people arriving in Sitka are working at public works projects, community-based government functions and operations, or private construction projects as approved by the municipal administrator.
Second.
Persons to be heard?
Yes, I do have a number of individuals who have signed up for public comment this evening. So the first person I'll be calling is Fran Hartman.
Just to let you know, the sound quality is fairly marginal coming from Harrigan Centennial Hall. How about getting an upgrade with some of that COVID money to allow us to have emergency communications or at least a splicing of our Zoom system and the and Harrigan. It's really marginal. Thank you.
Sarah, you're working the persons to be heard?
Yes, I'm calling now.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Hi, Fran. This is Sarah Peterson calling from the Assembly meeting this evening. Hi. We're ready for your public comment on item A, the amendment to the emergency ordinance.
Okay. We have on the radio and the assembly is not being broadcasted.
I don't know their schedule for broadcasting. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry, you kind of threw me off. I was waiting to hear it on the radio first. So my comment would be, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody on the assembly for such a good job of closing down Sitka. We are in the situation we're in with no cases because our assembly took that action and took it quickly. So my other comment is just simply that I hope they have really thought about this. The way I understand it is that some workers will be allowed in with no quarantine and can go straight to work, while others are quarantined. And I'm just not sure that's a good idea. So thanks very much, and thanks for the call.
Thank you, Fran. And I have one more individual to call, Mayor.
Okay.
And before you end public testimony, I need to make a disclosure, but I'll wait till after this.
The next person I'll be calling is Linda Marlin.
Rose?
Hi, Linda. This is Sarah Peterson calling from the emergency assembly meeting this evening. It's my understanding that you wanted to provide public comment on agenda item A, and that's the amendment to the emergency ordinance.
Yes, I do. I have a personal opinion on this. I've been working in the public here now for 40 years. I've been a waitress. A lot of you folks know me as LJ. What I see our city going through right now is a travesty, not only to the community, but the people that always give to our community, but to the people that do need help. And what you guys keep in this city shut down like it is, and I'm going to pick out certain little people or who's going to work and who is not going to work. I think you're overstepping people's rights here because we don't have a case of anything. We're a great town here in Sitka, and we will prevail. We'll come out of this great, but you know, this is a trickle down effect on the community, and it's really sad, and it's not working, and it's not good. You know, how are you going to get money for taxes if people aren't working? And what gets me is the city, state, and federal. You folks are going to get a paycheck. But the people down here in the trailer park down here from me, and the trailer park down the road, and the folks back here on the hill that are living from paycheck to paycheck, hey, you know, this is really sad. And what gets me, you guys are taking this time off and having everybody be this far apart. But I share a grocery store down here. We have these young people staying open for the community. And see, I know we're strong, we can do it. But this, you gotta open us up. We need, if we can get some of the, even the small Princess cruise ships coming in later on. I mean, it's not gonna do, I mean, we gotta be smart, but like I say, I'm all for opening up Sitka, and I really wish, you know, the best for everyone. But this really saddens my heart. I know what we can do. I used to work for Pam up there at the Baby. We were serving 700 people. One day we served 700 people. People were lined up downstairs. And this is what gets me. I know we can do it. We have the opportunity to do it. It's just, do you want to do it? Well, like my dad always told me, say, oh, I can't do it. You've already put something in front of you. You told yourself you can't. So I wish everyone luck there. I really thank you for taking my phone call. I just hope everyone has a clear head and does something for the community. I mean, geez, we really do need something to happen. And thank you once again. And God bless you all. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other persons to be heard, Sarah?
I have additional public testimony on this item.
Okay.
So the next comment is from Jaren Schmidt. She writes, in order to fully protect our island community, everyone coming into town must follow the given guidelines to quarantine for the full 14 days, not just a selection. Exceptions should not be made for any specific group. As reports have shown, anyone can be a carrier of COVID-19. Therefore, anyone traveling in should be expected to quarantine. Let's do the best we can to take care of our community. The projects needing attention will still be there after quarantine is complete. And again, that was from Jaren Schmidt. The next comment is from Cody Loomis. Assembly members of Sitka, I am in support of the Assembly aligning the City of Sitka with the state's mandates of travel and quarantine restrictions. I believe it is insultingly hypocritical to select a special interest group of people that are exempt from the quarantine requirements when traveling to Sitka. Consider your vote carefully on this matter, as it will be a defining vote. You are in severe danger of being blatantly corrupt by making a rule that is claimed to be in the best interest of all, just to then, days later, identify a group that are exempt from that rule. Those of you on the Assembly that believe you have the right to determine who is important enough to not follow the rules that you have claimed are paramount to keeping blood off your hands should consider your motives and evaluate your thought process. This is not the action of an unbiased and fair individual worthy of public service. If the lives of the citizens of Sitka are in fact not endangered by people traveling into town without quarantining, then in encourage an atmosphere of respect for others' wishes regarding their own personal safety, and allow the state of Alaska and the panel of doctors and scientists who are advising the governor to take the lead. And again, that comment is from Cody Loomis. The next comment is from Karen Keating. She writes, City Assembly members, please give us answers. I am resubmitting this letter for a second reading. I first submitted it April 28th. Today is May 5th. My concerns deal with the charter industry and all of us who are participants and operators. Attachment J, which modifies Mandate 11, applies to this area. I do wish that these meetings were more widely publicized, as Kevin Mosher nicely suggested in one such meeting, because I do not feel that the voice of everyone is being heard. At present, charters are all being grouped pretty much into one, and I assure you that we have our differences. Mosher nicely suggested in one such meeting, because I do not feel that the voice of everyone is being heard. At present, charters are all being grouped pretty much into one, and I assure you that we have our differences, particularly in terms of housing situations. Everyone on the assembly has talked of out-of-state employees coming in for the lodges and or for the fish processing plants. But what of the charter guests who fly in specifically for a 2 to possibly 6-day fishing trip, who are staying in the hotels and frequent all the various restaurants, along with all the other shops and amenities that Sitka offers? This undoubtedly brings in much money to the city in taxes alone. If the mandate stating that the 14-day quarantine has to stay in effect, what can that possibly mean for us? No one is going to fly to Sitka, stay isolated for 14 days so that they can then go on a 2 to 6-day fishing trip. It simply is not an option. And then, as far as attachment J, I ask you to please be reasonable. No one wants to harm, hurt, or infect another person with this virus, but the social distancing on a boat is impossible if you want to have more than one person on a charter, which of course will pay for absolutely nothing. And along with this, the sanitization plan. I fail to see how people all staying in the same lodge or even in the same hotel can be allowed to eat together on the boat every hour. The people are together, confined on the boat in the open sea with the same people all day. Is the virus going to somehow produce itself and infect them all? Please look at this. If you as the assembly are setting a protocol by which we can truly go fishing to actually fish, have an income, and also help support the town's businesses, then please just say that and let it be done. But to keep coming up with guidelines that can't possibly work makes me feel that we are no longer being looked at as people and part of the Sitka community, but more as just a big problem area that is in the way. The other part of charters is that we take deposits for the upcoming fishing trips. Not all of us have winter jobs. We live on the deposits and maintain our boats, etc. with said deposits. We have zero other income until the guests arrive and pay their balance due, which is then applied to the same as just mentioned. The problem here and now is that since we have taken in the deposits for this year, we will not have any other income at all unless we get that balance due, and we won't have money coming in for the deposits for next year since they will have been held over to 2021, which leaves us with absolutely nothing for a complete year. It will ruin many people. We cannot just start up. Even if things do drastically change in our favor, you have to give us time and a plan that is workable. Our guests can't be put on hold either. They too have lives. Please give us, as charter operators, something definite. And again, those comments are from Karen Keating. Next, I have a comment from Jaylene Owen, to whom it may concern. I'm a certified human resources professional who holds a graduate level degree in IO psychology. While I am not a medical physician nor an expert on pandemics, I do understand and have studied human behavior for many years. Also, I recognize the immense pressures and responsibilities our government and communities are facing regarding this COVID-19 situation, but feel that some of our current public policies on commerce and movement need to be reconsidered and less restrictive. Medical experts in the fields of epidemiology and virology are determining our country's response to COVID-19 with the sole purpose of minimizing COVID-19 infections and death. While their research is essential, I believe it is vital to keep this pandemic in perspective. In the beginning, the problem with making informed decisions about this novel coronavirus was that we didn't have a whole lot of data on the virus. That is changing. There is now scientific-based data that tells us relatively few Americans will die from COVID-19, Yet our initial misguided efforts to save lives has not only temporarily strained our economy, but continuing these efforts will undoubtedly destroy millions of lives and cause immeasurable harm for the sake of an effectively small impact on our nation's health. The argument lives matter more than the economy fails to account that the economy equals lives. So what's the right amount of economic pain to endure in order to save lives as the economy faces a deep recession? Per the CDC's website 2017 final data, the United States population is approximately 328 million. Approximately 2.8 million Americans die annually. More than 1.2 million die from heart disease and cancer alone. Another 500,000 die from fatal accidents, chronic lung disease, and cerebrovascular disease. As of today, only 50,000 COVID-19 related deaths have been recorded. Most are not what they seem like, as the medical community is speaking out about factors to help record and in essence capture the death mortality trends of COVID-19. In other words, the count is provisional and direct causative COVID-19 fatalities could be overreported, fueling unnecessary anxiety. Nonetheless, most experts agree that the COVID-19 death rate will decline as more testing is available and will likely end up at less than 1%. While most of those deaths will be in older patients with a shortened life expectancy due to pre-existing chronic disease, more than 80% of cases have been categorized as mild, and the vast majority of people who become infected will fully recover and help provide us with herd immunity. Yet policymakers insist we need to take these extreme measures to protect the vulnerable. But what definition of vulnerable are they using? Are they including the citizens who are vulnerable to poverty, substance abuse, neglect, mental illness, domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, and suicide? Are you aware that millennials like myself are expected to have a shorter life expectancy than our parents due to substance abuse and mental illness? COVID-19 targets the old and sick, but isolation and loneliness kills indiscriminately. Can you not see how dangerous this is for our nation and its citizens as we embarking on a time when such measures will undoubtedly increase mental health disorders, addictions, overdoses, assaults, murders, and suicides, that these deaths may far outnumber the deaths caused by the virus? Overall, I am infuriated by the disregard for America's small businesses and the government's usurpation of control at every level, particularly when I am well enough educated to know that COVID-19 comprises only a small portion of our overall health crisis. Furthermore, Alaska is not Seattle, New York, or San Francisco. We are not a vertical city. We do not have their population densities nor their homeless populations. While the benefits of closures in those cities may outweigh the financial losses and economic social hardships, blanket policies to close our state and similar states clearly do not. When it comes to public policy, and especially an urgent and life-altering policy issue like the current pandemic, I understand the dilemma can be tricky when politicians are trying to assess whether a policy does more harm than good. The feasibility of an exhaustive cost-benefit analysis can be hard. The devil is in the execution of the policy, not in the details of the idea. While human behavior is difficult to predict, it's not impossible. Humans tend to put their self-interest first when it's uncertain if doing so will cause harm. I urge us to examine local studies and statistics to make wise, relevant policies for our state and the rest of the country, because these irrelevant models, which are currently being applied, are having a negative effect on our recovery. I feel like we are flying blind, especially as the chaos of uncertainty escalates hour by hour and sometimes minute by minute. Bankrupting our local businesses and shutting in our citizens is not improving our health. It only diminishes our resources. Isn't there some sort of equilibrium that can be reached now that cases are subsiding and we have successfully flattened that curve? Because this trade-off between stopping the virus and stopping the economy is an unnecessary struggle. Consider how we have been forced to close parks, beaches, fitness, and recreation facilities despite multiple medical studies demonstrating that moderate exercise as well as socialization improves immune function and promotes longevity. Additionally, the state has restricted dentists to treat only emergent cases when in fact there is a proven correlation between oral health and cardiovascular disease. Coronaviruses are here to stay. Maybe instead of saving Americans from the pandemic, we should focus on our efforts on making our communities healthy enough to survive it. In general, I am just frustrated. I see shoppers consumed by fear and panic, donning masks and gloves to protect their health, all the while They fill their carts with high-calorie foods made up of processed and refined sugars that are far more deadly than the virus. Why doesn't our public health discussions not address the obesity pandemic, which is far more widespread and taking many more lives? Our citizens are following social distancing guidelines put forth by the CDC, but they ignore the abundance of other CDC guidelines regarding exercise, maintaining a healthy weight, cancer screenings, and routine child and adult vaccinations that are proven to prevent disease. Our current public policies are so narrowly focused on COVID-19 that they neglect the health risks that will kill far more of our citizens. When our government posts COVID-19 statistics, it should seriously consider also posting the number of deaths due to chronic disease, accidents, and suicides that have occurred since the first of the year. And maybe this will give people better perspective and even help them identify and reduce their greater risks. Sadly, the U.S. suffers nearly 50,000 suicides annually, a number which will surely increase given the recent unemployment and isolation that has been imposed upon us. Would our citizens choose this trade-off? I'm not sure, but at the very least, educate them as to these realities and let them decide which vulnerable population they opt to save. I implore you to work towards a solution to open up America and support your governments and communities to implement policies to help optimize the health, physical, emotional, and economic well-being of our citizens so that they do not fear COVID-19, but instead are strong enough to overcome it, and also the ones that will undoubtedly follow. And again, those comments are from Jaylene Owen. Next, I will read comments from Nicole Belinsky. Dear Assembly members, I just recently arrived in Sitka after spending a month and a half quarantined at a private residence down south away from the public. I am self-quarantining now at my residence in Sitka due to the state of Alaska's health mandate and your emergency ordinance that says I must, even though I know I'm not sick or a threat to anyone in this town. I know you previously had meetings stating you don't want visitors or workers to come to your town as they would jeopardize the health of the people in this town. If the health of this town and keeping the virus out is so important, then how can you even entertain the idea to make an exemption to this and allow certain people to come to town and not quarantine? These workers you are wanting to exempt from the quarantine have the same chance of bringing this virus as anyone else who is not in this exemption group. They should have to abide by the state of Alaska's health mandates and not get a special treatment from this city's assembly. Your vote tonight will be heard loud and clear by all. And again, those comments are from Nicole Belinsky. Next, I will read comments from Danielle Roberts. Good evening. My opinion is that everyone traveling into Sitka from in-state and or out of state should be required to self-quarantine for 14 days to protect our island community. Even workers coming to work for the city of Sitka, community-based government functions and operations, or private construction projects. Thank you for your time. Again, that's from Danielle Roberts. And next I will read comments from Teresa Weiser. Thank you for the opportunity to comment this evening. Owner of the Wild Strawberry Lodge, since 1990, we employ 35 to 40 employees each season, and many are seasonal. I have struggled every day since early March to find a path through the economic chaos we are experiencing. I believe there are many folks feeling the same stress of how to stay safe and yet still survive economically. Revising my April 23rd comments, we will not be opening until July 5th now. But then again, it could be even later to open or not at all. I truly cannot say how we will proceed yet. All we have to work with are based on daily or weekly evolving, changing ordinances and mandate regulations from the city and state, as well as all the other states in this country. To quote 3A from your next ordinance 2020-25, the Assembly recognizes that the governmental response to the COVID-19 pandemic is necessarily evolving. You, the City Assembly, have recognized the pandemic virus as a public threat by all of the previous regulations you have implemented. Yet you want to make exceptions for your governmental body for work time only, which sends a very confusing message to the public. How am I, as a business owner, expected to accept that you can make exceptions for yourselves, but not for all the other businesses you still expect/mandate to quarantine in their rooms 14 days before they can start working? This seems like a double standard message you are sending to all the seasonal businesses in town. This is how I interpret your new ordinance. Do I get the same considerations for my seasonal workers coming that need to work on site to get ready for our season? and then they can stay quarantined when not working at night. Charter fishing was declared by the state as an essential service. How do we safely open and operate our tourism business in this current climate while the city still recognizes the virus as still a public threat? What are the calculated risks? If and when we can open and operate are two big questions, and we are hit with the Alaska state health mandates as well. For example, attachment L rules about very restrictive lodging rules, which reduces our capacity by 50% at least. If we can even open up our businesses under new parameters and just call it restrictions, it may not be financially feasible to operate, and which rules could evolve, change weekly. How do we meet each new and revised evolving city ordinances and government health mandates and phases of mandates? What is the next regulation hammer to fall on our heads, creating more financial uncertainty? We know we are not starting until July 5th or longer, and we know our business could possibly not even open up this summer. What is not being addressed are all the travelers coming to Alaska that are not here for employment or business, including the travelers coming for tourism activities, fun, pleasure, and leisure. Lastly, I will repeat my question from my April 23rd testimony, which was not addressed previously. The very last line of the City of Sitka Emergency Ordinance 2020-14 posted online and is included in this 2020-25 ordinance reads, reenactment of Emergency Ordinance number 2020-14 pre-scheduled for June 9th, 2020 to consider extending the 61-day expiration. I view this open to potential 61 additional extension as a big hammer of uncertainty hanging over our heads to stop us from operating this season. Thank you. And again, those comments are from Teresa Weiser. Next, I will read the comments from Samantha Hoffman. The Assembly of Sitka successfully passed, approved, and adopted Ordinance number 2020-14, and now because the Assembly suddenly feels that members of the local government sector, specifically those that work at or within the Public Works Department, community-based government functions and operations, or private construction projects, should be exempt from the 14-day self-quarantine requirement. This is a very clear-cut example of legal opportunism. The Assembly is attempting to deliberately manipulate this ordinance for the purposes that it was not meant for, continuously making amendments, modifications, and adding exemptions completely defeats the overall purpose and intent behind the ordinance. The entire purpose of this ordinance was to protect the life, health, and welfare of the persons in Sitka due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and to swiftly modify the content of this ordinance to only accommodate those who the Assembly sees fit is exploiting the ambiguities and or loopholes of the ordinance, which to a certain extent only provides personal gain to those that the Assembly feels inclined to make exemptions for. Within Ordinance 2020-14, under point 5, emergency declaration, it is written that while a person's entity's right to work and or to engage in business is important, the significant risk posed to life, health, and welfare of persons in Sitka by the COVID-19 pandemic requires this emergency ordinance. With this, I ask all the Assembly members, how are these specific individuals any different than the individuals and or industries previously defined by the state of Alaska as essential and or a part of the state's critical workforce infrastructure? Why should we be making exemptions for these individuals and or the specific industry when other local businesses in town who also provide essential services to the community of Sitka will not be exempt from this ordinance? Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment on ordinance number 2020-25. And those comments are from Samantha Hoffman. And then I have one final comment from Luke Johnson. He writes, hello all, just a quick comment on the Sentinel story from last Friday. An emergency ordinance of the City and Borough of Sitka amending emergency ordinance 2020-14 by adding an exception to the 14-day self-quarantine obligation when people arriving in Sitka are working at essential services and critical workforce infrastructure as approved by the municipal administrator. He writes, details are sad in parentheses, details are sadly missing from the city's own website as of this morning. And then there's a link. Then he continues to write, I'll be blunt, this very simply looks like the city is not wanting to play by its own rules and valuing itself and its own projects over that of private individuals' businesses. I'm sure there will be statements about the value, need, necessity of these essential workers and their project to everyone in Sitka and the dire effects that these long scheduled projects are delayed or derailed, and thus the need for an exemption. But I have to imagine that any private business owner surely feels like they too add value to all of Sitka in some form, even if their desired project and workforce don't fall under the umbrella of a public project. Without being a business owner myself, I'd have to imagine the quarantine ordinance is having the exact same negative effects and repercussions on them as it is on the city and its projects. I'd encourage you not to play favorites and either abide by the one-size-fits-all ordinance or consider rescinding, rewriting the ordinance in its entirety. Thanks for the consideration, Luke Johnson. And that's all I have for public comment.
Is that it, Sarah?
Yes.
Valerie?
Well, I tried to get in to disclose earlier that I may have a conflict, but I'm going to go with my statement and say this is a start, I believe, in opening more businesses, and I believe it was well-intentioned. With that said, I don't believe it is lawful or fair to other businesses that are still waiting for the locally elected body to bless their businesses to be lawfully open without a bunch of BS regulations and restrictions. I am definitely not in favor of giving an administrator that is relatively new into his position carte blanche as to whether or not he will allow businesses that he may know relatively little about right to circumvent an ordinance that I voted to repeal unsuccessfully. No offense meant to you, Administrator Leach. It is my belief that I have a substantial financial interest due to income my husband receives from one of the companies that is hoping on passage of this emergency ordinance. I'm reserving my right as a small business owner and taxpayer to be heard under public testimony. So with that said, under public testimony, I probably would have asked you, and I know that none of you can answer, anybody that's speaking, how many of you have small businesses? How many have lost income because of small businesses? How many of you are guaranteed your income? I think a big majority of the assembly is. And, you know, personally, I would probably vote in favor of us, but I don't think ethically I should. And the only reason I could vote ethically for rescinding this is because it related to a lot bigger population. I think that we have targeted the charter industry in the way that that ordinance was crafted. And I think attachment A to mandate 10 better serves the state. And I understand, you know, this is gonna expire, but I will not be voting on this. Thank you.
Before we go to the assembly, do you want us to make those comments, Mr. Leach?
No, I have no comments to add, Mayor.
You have none?
I have none. I think I can readdress the email that I sent to all of you a week ago.
Okay. Right.
There's critical projects outside the city that are stopped on the federal and state level, and that is the driver behind bringing this to the table.
And a lot of the people we're talking about coming in, I think it's just one or two people on critical projects for the city, the marine relay station and the harbor and the wastewater plant, plus marine Sawmill Creek Road and the Coast Guard preparation for the Coast Guard boat coming here. Okay, assembly comments.
I'll go ahead and go. This was not meant to stir up drama in any way or to show favoritism to anyone. I will point out that I did vote with Valerie to rescind this whole thing a couple weeks ago, and that failed. And so that's fine. It's the vote of the assembly. This ordinance or this adaptation of the ordinance is simply to allow some critical construction and things like that to happen, things that that must be done. And I know it's not completely fair, but it's not meant to be divisive in any way. I felt like this was to try to give a little bit of discretion to the administrator. I know he's new, but I do have confidence that he could fairly deal with this. I was thinking of this as a pretty simple thing, but that's my comment.
Okay. Yeah, Tor.
Yeah, a couple of things here. First of all, I don't have super strong feelings about this. Just to comment that the main difference between this and other businesses is we're talking very small numbers of people that can be very easily isolated and monitored. And so it's not, you've got economies of scale. And that's one reason why I don't feel too strongly that this will hurt our isolation there. Like I said, I don't have, I was perfectly willing to co-sponsor with Kevin. Just to make a point though, that that the charter clients are covered under the state mandate, regardless of what the city does. The city right now is not the one stopping charter clients from coming into town. I mean, yes, our ordinance also calls for a 2-week, but so does the state, and ours is tied to the state. So if and when the state changes or rescinds that mandate, the main ordinance goes away. But that I don't, this, like I said, it's all a balancing act trying to keep things going, but the smaller critical construction contracts where there's not a lot of people coming in that can be isolated on their job site, go straight to their hotels, and that somewhat can be enforced because the various entities that have the contracts will tell them to meet with it. So like I said, I probably will vote for this, but if the rest of the body doesn't feel like that it's appropriate, I would understand why.
Kevin Knox.
So a couple of questions, I guess, for John, and then just comments about how this all ends up playing out. I do find it a little curious, and I get that on any one of these projects there are people that come in and out with varying different degrees of specialty and other things like that, but some of these projects have been ongoing, and all of a sudden they're claiming that they've had to come to complete stops or whatever. Just seems a little curious to me. And maybe explanation can be put to that, but the city projects that seem like they've already all of a sudden come to a stop, like the wastewater treatment plant remodel, that was going on for a while, and then all of a sudden it stops. And we'd had this mandate in already, and the state had already had its mandate by the time that whole thing started. So I guess I don't understand that. One of the concerns that I have, and I guess a question for John about this is, if we're bringing, if any one of these companies is bringing in people to, additional people to work, and it's only 1, 2, 6 people, whatever, a small number of people, they're still mixing with all the rest of the crew. How are we going to be able to mitigate or address the possible contamination or infection rates there? How do we have real authority and an ability to make sure that proper precautions are being adhered to as far as their plans go and other things like that? I know that this has been a concern all along with any one of these mandates that have come down from the state. The city has some authority to be able to do things around this, but we don't necessarily always have the resources. Everybody likes to throw out the unfunded mandate term. Of course, this is yet another way that we're going to have to put additional resource into making sure that our community stays safe. I was also curious about how this proposal then would dovetail with the governor's mandate 10, in that the governor or the state is requiring these companies to put forward these plans. Yet we're saying that we may want to provide exception within these. I guess I don't really fully understand how that mixes or doesn't mix.
John, you want to give some answers?
Yeah, I I will try to answer all those, and please remind me, Mr. Knox, if I miss any of the points here. First thing is that if this passes, exemptions are not automatic. A mitigation plan will still have to be presented to a panel that we have in the EOC that reviews those plans to make sure that their plan addresses the mitigation efforts put forth in the original ordinance. Those still remain. So after that plan is reviewed by the board and then given to me with a recommendation, then I can make that determination on whether or not they can operate in a bubble per se, and complete their work, not interact with the community, and leave Sitka or go back to a quarantine location. Your next question, was it about the state alignment? I apologize, I forgot that one. Was it the plans at the state versus the plans here?
Correct.
I've run into that situation many times where the state has approved a plan based on the exemptions that they have in their attachment A, and it comes here, and those plans do not, they might address the items in our ordinance. However, many of them did not have a hard 14-day quarantine that was required by the original ordinance, so I would have to disapprove their plan. And it creates quite a bit of confusion when the state says you're good to go, and our ordinance did not allow the flexibility to change that, other than for first line healthcare workers. So this is, the intent of this was to clear up that confusion somewhat.
So I assume you've had some conversations within the management team there, the possible, group that's going to look at these and review them. But from a medical standpoint, or from our public health standpoint, how do we, or have you been able to address how, 5 people coming in from out of town and quarantining on the job, but then they're mixing with local members who are also contractors or laborers on that same job, and then those people aren't in quarantine? It's like peeing in the peeing side of the pool again. Everybody likes to bring that one up. So how are we working that one out?
That's something that would be reviewed in the plan, as we would make sure that they are not interacting with local personnel. And I have to trust the plan that goes forward, that they're going to follow what's written, and they say they will not interact with our local personnel in completion of their work.
John, as part of the mitigation plan for coming in, that they are tested to be COVID-19 negative?
It's not a requirement in the plan, Mayor, but there is a section in there where they should address their testing, whether it happens before they leave, when they get here. It should be addressed in the plan, but there is no hard requirement for it.
Okay.
And it is something that Search has offered, and we can work with them if that is an option.
Yeah, we can. We should. Pre-testing the testing when they get here. Just for the record, I also voted against extending the ordinance, and along with 2 other members of the Assembly, we failed, which is fine. Other comments from the Assembly? Yeah, Steve, please.
Just a couple things here. First, I really disagree with the idea that our governmental projects are more important than any of the members of the public's projects. I think an exemption for just us is the extremely wrong way to go. I don't like legislating special privileges for what we deem prudent and necessary at the time. So I can't support this ordinance because it does give special privileges just to us, but would be interested in, perhaps, if that's the way the Assembly wants to go, a full-scale downgrade of it entirely. I'd be willing to have that conversation, but I'm not willing to have a conversation that only allows our projects and projects approved by the administrator. It doesn't sit right with me. So thank you.
I'd like to point out that this isn't just for government. If you read the motion and then also in the ordinance, it says or private construction projects as approved. This is not just government. This is also for private as well.
Correct, but it's still under the purview of the administrator to make that determination. And we're determining that these workers are more important than other workers in the grand scheme.
Other comments from the assembly? Dr. Ween?
Good afternoon. I'm going to request a little patience. I have a potpourri of commentary here. I will not be supporting this amendment, and several reasons. One is that I feel that there were enough powers in 2014 to allow the same things to happen. The other thing is that, for example, in line 55, number 2, there are no parameters set, meaning how many people, what kind of congregants, et cetera, et cetera. It ultimately doesn't add anything. If you look at 2014 on line 121, it says required self-quarantine, and then it says except as provided in this emergency ordinance. It goes on with the, in quotes, 11 commandments. Ultimately, it's a Wizard of Oz thing where you can tap your shoes 3 times and you're back home, meaning the administrator did have the power to do whatever they wanted. But my real question is, how many holes in a seine net does it take to make your seine net not functional? And what I'm seeing is an enormous array of contradictory rules, et cetera, that are now piling up, which makes all of this non-functional. And whether it is the intent or not, certain people, and I understand, feel why they are being or feeling that they are targeted. The hunker down rule, expires on the 12th. Fish and Games rule for charter expires on May 21st. There are all these explorations, and in listening to the conversation, I don't think you really understand how fluid the situation is. I've had the opportunity to view the draft ordinance for Appendix A on Mandate 10. And by the way, I've reviewed all the mandates and annotated them. And the draft ordinance is in essence having the processors test all the people as they come in, and not having self-quarantine, but having supervised quarantine, which means the employer supervises that quarantine. I don't see any of it in the 2025, and this is all changing. And so in essence, things are moving and we are not keeping up with them. The 14-day mandate, and I appreciate what people are saying, is just not working. When previously I stated that the cat was out of the bag, I actually had no idea how far out of the bag she was. Yesterday was quite a beautiful Sitkin day. The streets were alive, the basketball courts were full, lots of people out and about just enjoying the day, new faces in town, oblivious to our regulations. No one is paying attention at this time. So we, after almost 2 months of this, in quotes, quarantine, we are back at the beginning. It's really basic public health measures that really count. No reason to now there is no reason except to just continue with some common sense. Wear a mask when you feel appropriate, a little social distancing, wash your hands. There is a lot of information out there that's coming in, but we do not know about post-positivity immunity or how long it will last. We don't really know if we can get reinfected. This is a virus that is actually smarter than us. It is mutating. There's a good chance as we open up the state, as we see in additional mandates, 16, 17, that there will be a surge. Well, what are we going to do then when we surge? Are we going to close back down? And after the surge, there might be a second and third wave and seasonality to this whole thing, meaning that seasonality, meaning that it'll just be back every year. And by the way, do you know, who do you think gets infected in these second and third waves? It's those who were not infected in the first or the second. And so this is a medical problem which has political consequences. And I think that's why we have this incredible patchwork of things that are coming down. We're still back in the 1918, we don't have an effective cure. Whether we have a vaccine or not, I've been reading the scholarly academic journals about where we are on this, and I am just flummoxed. But one thing I can tell you, none of this is working, and it's hurting everybody. And I really feel that this ordinance answers nothing. And I can tell you that the processors are going to follow the state, and they're going to follow these new draft mandate things that as testing expands, that appears to be the way that the state is going. Whether we have enough supplies or not is unclear. And I think there is no reason why we can't have an intelligent reopening. As I said in past meetings, there's no difference between 40 and 60 people at the supermarkets and 3 people at work in Rugged. And so I really believe that this is not working. It has become, in essence, farcical because it is a seine net that needs to be fixed, and we can't fix it because it doesn't make sense from a medical point of view. We can't go down into full lockout, and it is highly destructive if we continue down this path. And that's why I'm voting no. It adds nothing, and I can tell you that we are going nowhere fast. And this is not good. We have to rethink stuff, and it boils down, as I said, to basic public health measures at this moment. But even those will not persevere in this time. We can't create fortress pioneer home. There will be breaches if such a thing is going to happen. I think it's the whole thing is crazy. And as we get more information, just as an example, in New York City, there were 13,319 deaths. But believe it or not, only 81 of those deaths had no underlying conditions. That is 0.61%. And that comes from yesterday. I can other statistics. So
Sorry if I can. Listen, Dr. Wayne, I just want to tell you, I disagree with that. I mean, a lot of your comments are, dependent, unknown, perspective, blah, blah, blah. First of all, I think the town of Sitka has done what they've been asked to do. When I go out,
correct.
I see people wearing masks. I see people doing social distancing and so on and so forth. And we've been blessed by that. I'm going to vote for this, maybe the only one. But the fact is, the projects we're talking about, well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Leach, but I think sometimes you're talking about 1 or 2 specific high quality electrician to come in and help us with the Marine Service Center, wrong PACs, of the Marine substation and so forth. And public projects affect the whole town. And I do,
Yeah,
it does say for the private as well, but these are projects that affect our entire town and the well-being of our town. Whether you're talking about the wastewater plant, Marine substation, which is the most critical electrical structure in town, notwithstanding the dams and the 2 power plants, and getting our harbor so our boats could get back there, as well as getting the Coast Guard in here to get ready for the ship, as well as DOT. Yeah, I understand the double standard, and you could say that it sounds good and it may well be right, but I think this is worth consideration. But I'm not all doom and gloom. And I know we have to be safe, and people who are vulnerable need to shelter in place and be safe. But if we don't take rational, measured responses to get our city back in operation, to include the charter fleet, we're going to suffer. And that's going to be worse or as bad as it is. So anyway, that's my last speech of the day. Yes, Valerie, go ahead.
I understand that I'm not participating in voting on this, but I want to know when the time is appropriate, I can make a motion to attempt to rescind at our next Tuesday regularly scheduled meeting, Ordinance 2020-14. It sounds like maybe there might be 5 votes. So at least that gives those people hope that we'll move positively. So let me know when I can make that motion. Thank you.
Right, actually.
Mr. Mayor, I had one more comment, if you don't mind.
Please.
I just wanted to echo basically everything you just said and support. I think, it doesn't sound like we're going to have the votes. I'd really appreciate it, Steve, if you could vote in favor of this, please, because the Marine Street substation, that's like 80% of the town's power. If that fails, we have to get that fixed and repaired. This is basically to get a few essential things done. So I would really hope you would consider that. Thank you.
John, on the 12th, John, don't we have to reapprove the current ordinance to extend it? Or what do we have to do?
That's the resolution, the shelter in place.
The resolution or ordinance we have to do. Well, I'm with Valerie. I think we need to on the 12th, we at least have our body face up to whether or not we want to continue this the austere path that we're currently in. That is confusing, Dr. Ween. It is tough to do this. And a lot of it depends on individual behavior. So I would like to be sure that on the 12th, we're in a position to have assembly members vote up and down on what we should be doing. Okay. Kevin Knox, please.
Quickly.
John, did you have something?
Yeah.
Kevin Knox, yeah.
If he jumps in to answer these questions before we get off track from that topic.
I'm sorry, I missed what's going on.
I'd like to assist by giving you my opinion on.
Is Brian speaking?
I am speaking. Yes, this is Brian Hanson.
Yeah, can you speak louder, please, Brian?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, better.
Hunker down resolution is scheduled to expire on its own course on the May 12th meeting.
Okay.
If someone wanted that to be extended, they would have to get on the agenda to do so. Otherwise, if they don't get on the agenda, then it expires on the 12th.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
The other ordinance, the 2020-24, expires at a later date. And in order to rescind that, it's already been tried to be rescinded once, but you could do it again. You would have to get on either on the May 12th meeting or some other meeting and get an agenda item to try to rescind it again. That's what you're left with.
Wasn't that ordinance also tied to whether the state rescinds theirs? They rescind it sooner than that one gets rescinded?
Hunker down.
That's
okay.
Yes, yes, it is.
I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time here. Yeah, Kevin Knox.
Pax, it is tied to the state travel restrictions.
Right.
So
yeah.
if the state drops their travel restrictions, the ordinance goes away.
Yep, good. Kevin Knox.
Okay, so I guess, so there's another question for John. Just so, we have it all, but also that the public has it all. Not everybody's seeing the email that you provided us and some of the impacts, some of the requesting organizations or contractors that have come forward with this particular request. But can you lay out some of the full impacts of not passing this tonight? If these contractors, to include the Marine substation, to include K&E, the Coast Guard, any others that are, are high impact, the ones that you're really looking forward to being able to offer this to. And if there are other solutions on the table that, you will be able to work with, because, I agree, I would not like to see that marine substation. That thing's already been, pushed out quite a bit. The Marine Street substation, it's been pushed out quite a bit, and it's, it's over on its time. We need to get it done, obviously, for, the electrical, the electrical health for the city. Obviously, that is a critical piece of infrastructure. But do we have other opportunities that we can explore here, or is this the only path forward?
I think we've explored all those other opportunities, and to discuss my email that I sent to you, it was after we exhausted all the other opportunities, looking for local contractors that could do the work, looking for local electricians, looking for local plumbers, and some of these contractors were not able to, or the main contractors were not able to find the local help to get some of these specific tasks done. I couldn't list them all off to you, but I can say for the city, the way I evaluate this is not to just keep the city projects going, it's to keep city projects going that are essential for the public. So if we're working on substations, if we're working on the harbors, if we're working on the roads, it's generally meant to assist with the public good. So Marine Street substation, the wastewater treatment plant. In discussions with DOT, they have a construction season, and there were 3 projects at risk if they were not allowed to come in. One of them being the airport, Sawmill Creek, and I cannot remember the other one off the top of my head. But some of their contractors like K&E and Seacon had to have workers come in from outside of Sitka to either repair equipment or continue on with road projects. One of the risks was Sawmill Creek could potentially not get done this year if they were not able to come in. As far as our own harbors, if we did not get the electrical and plumbing work done at the harbor, anyway, we've got boats stacked up that are on temporary leases in other places, and they're trying to get their permanent spot instead of moving from temporary spot to temporary spot, and they need to get out with their business as well. So trying to get Crescent Harbor open back up for our fleet. So again, these were evaluated from a stance of the public good to continue those moving forward.
I guess Crescent Harbor, I think the public perception, some of the public perception is that was already ongoing, that was already underway. The electrical and the plumbing was already being done, and then all of a sudden pulled off, and now they're saying they can't get it done because they have to comply with a 14-day quarantine, even though those workers were already here, already working. I guess, can you help with that public perception? I mean, the optic around it it's a little off.
Yeah, that's not my perception anyway, and that's not the information I received. Is there were different phases of work, and if there was plumbing and electrical work happening earlier in the project, those personnel have left to go work on other projects for their main contractor. And when they get to this ending phase, they needed to come back into Sitka to finish that. So I think my understanding is they departed before all of the, or they departed after the early work was completed. There are some things that we were able to accomplish ourselves, but the plumbing and electrical work that's necessary now, those personnel would have to come back into Sitka. They are physically not here at the moment.
Thanks, John. Yeah, Dr. Wayne.
I'm sorry that there may have been a misconception, and certainly in your statement there was, as concerning my statements, Mayor Paxton. What I was saying was, in essence, that 2020-14 does not work. And I have seen it not work. And 2020-25, if 2020-14 is not working, then the current ordinance we are considering tonight, in the face of still maintaining 2020-14, is just unfair to many, many people. So my point being that both of the ordinances tonight's ordinance needs not to be passed. And at our next meeting, we need to rescind 2020-14 and accept the state mandates. They are changing how they are viewing things, and it's a very fluid situation. And after viewing everything from both the inside and the outside, I feel that this is the best way to proceed, because if things aren't working, why hobble certain individuals and certain businesses, et cetera, and not others? I think that if we got rid of 14 and don't vote for this, then I think it solves the problem overall, and it will allow the state to begin to evolve in their treatment of this. And that is my new current feeling. And I can only think of Animal Farm, the book by George Orwell. And
I haven't read Animal Farm, Dr. Wayne.
Pardon?
I have read Animal Farm.
So you know that the fact that some pigs are more equal than others shouldn't be. And so what I'm saying is, don't pass this tonight. And on Tuesday, we will put in 2020-14 rescission, get that done, and then begin to understand what the new mandates. As a matter of fact, Dr. Zink said they want to get away from mandates. They are changing their whole approach.
Right.
And I think that this will work much better than making, again, just another patchwork over a seine net that has multiple holes. This is one little patch, and I think we need to rethink it. And the way to do it is get rid of 2020-14 and not vote this in. So I'd like you to consider that.
Right. And I'm not arguing with you, Dr. Wayne. I would just say I want to get rid of 2014 and do this as well. But let the elephants dance. I think we've all had any comment before I call for the vote. Okay, Sarah, call for the vote.
I actually, before I take the roll or the vote, I would like to ask our municipal attorney. I know, Valerie, you mentioned that you wouldn't be voting on this item. I was wondering if the assembly needs to take any, or the mayor needs to make any determination.
I have a substantial financial interest, and I'm not going to say how much. Thank you.
Well, if it's up to me, you can vote, Valerie. I understand the rules of it. You vote if you want to. You all vote and stand up for what we stand for. Okay, call for the vote.
Well, okay. I don't want to belabor the, so Valerie's not voting. Is that correct? Because of a substantial financial interest. All right. Perfect. Mayor Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Christensen.
I don't know. Yes.
Mr. Knox.
No.
Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
Mr. Azabeth.
No.
And Dr. Wayne.
No.
The motion may have 3-3.
I would like to state for the record that I would be willing to co-sponsor adding the rescission of 2020-14 to Tuesday, May 12th, regularly scheduled assembly meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
I would agree to sponsor that.
Yeah, well, that's good. And Mr. Leach, I think what you can tell people from McKinnon and elsewhere, excuse me, people, but that it didn't pass tonight, but we'll probably be in good shape on the 12th of May, if I could read the tea leaves. Okay, any persons to be heard now before we adjourn? Yeah, Dr. Wayne.
This is in my Rod Serling voice. Imagine, if you will, a world where Cinco de Mayo falls on Taco Tuesday, only to be ruined by a virus named after a Mexican beer. Thank you.
Noted. Any other, okay. Any other persons to be heard, Sarah?
No.
Okay, call for adjournment.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.